For those of you who don't know me, I am a local man of 4 years standing. Love Kentish, love Railton where I live. Some time ago, at a helping hands, I was speaking to one of the men who was working, and he's a man well into his 70s. And he said, "Peter, I've been a Christian my whole life. I've been to churches, meetings, Bible studies." He said, "I've heard it all." He said, "When I go to church, there's no new message." And I thought, he probably has. He's heard the Gospels, he's heard the Old Testament, he's heard all of these things. And so what can I bring you tonight that you haven't heard before? And I'm encouraged there's a lot of young men here tonight. That's excellent to see. In May 1923, my mother was born. In September 1926, my father was born. Some of you will know Mum and Dad. They are both still alive, residing in a nursing home in Ulverston. My mother has been a godly woman her whole life. My father was a church-going man, but only became a godly man when I was 15, when an experience similar to what Peter was sharing happened to him, and God touched his life, and he was never the same again. And for when I was this high, my mother was always on at my two brothers and my sister, talking about the Lord's coming again. You must be ready. And so I grew up thinking, well, it's going to happen any time. And whenever Mum would see the moon turn a different shade of red, she'd say, "That's the sign. Mario, you know all about these things." And so I grew up from a young boy to a teenager to a young man, and my mother's message never changed. She said, "The Lord's coming." And like the man I was talking to, I've been in churches my whole life. I've heard messages, I've heard inspirational messages, I've heard boring messages. I've heard messages which are absolute rubbish. I heard a message one day and I thought, where does he get this from? Just not true, but by jingos, it sounded good. And for those of you who've walked in the ways of the Lord and you've attended churches, you've been to some of those meetings. Some good, not so good. Those of you who trawl the internet and YouTube looking for the latest and the greatest, you will know that people have been predicting dates for a long time. Different churches predicted he was coming back in 1918, 1927, 1936, 1945. Those of you who know something about the year of Jubilee, which is what this song is singing about, and I apologise for the pause in our reception there. We don't set dates. And then when you know what people say on the internet, there's a man now saying, well, 2019 is the year of Jubilee. Prisoners will be released, captives will be set free, land will be restored. Be that as it may, I want to quote some things to you tonight. When Mum and Dad were born, Mum's 95. Is there anyone here past 95 tonight? Dad's 92. Anyone over 92 tonight? No? We're getting close. Maybe for some of you, I don't know. It was a different world. No televisions, no telephones, no microwave ovens, no electric kettles, no computers, no ATMs, no supermarkets, no doctor's surgeries like we know them today, few medical operations, audiology, foot doctors, you name it. None of that was around when Mum and Dad were born and progressed through their years. And I asked Mum and Dad last week when I visited them, I said, Did you have a car? They laughed. No, we didn't have a car. They said, no one had a car. I said, how did you get around? We walked. We had bicycles. Now, we've got young people here today. I'm talking about my mum and dad who are still alive today. The changes that we've seen in that generation are mind-blowing. If you sat down and worked out what we have now that we didn't even have 50 years ago, let alone 90 years ago. So we're in a different world today. Or are we? Homicide, which is when someone takes a life, murder, between July 2012 and June 2014, these were the last figures that I could access, and I'm talking in Australia, there were 487 homicides in Australia in that 2-year span. 38% were by stabbing, 24% by beating, 13% by shooting, and the remainder were through a variety of other methods. Now, I know that there are mass shootings happening all over the world, but don't you think if nearly 40% are due to stabbings, why don't we put a ban on knives? And you think, well, that's a stupid thing. Well, why are we putting a ban on weapons? Now, I'm not a gun lobbyist. I'm none of those things. But I'm just trying to get us to think some things through here. If 40% of people are killed by stabbings, and 13% are killed by rifles or firearms, yet where's all the action happening today? And I'm not speaking things, don't read into what I'm saying. Some of you will remember April 1996, when the master of deceit, evil and murder infiltrated the mind of a young man called Martin Bryant, who took weapons to Port Arthur and shot 35 people dead, injured some 23 if I'm correct. You remember that event? September 2011. 19 hijackers commandeered 4 planes. Went into the Twin Towers, went into the Pentagon, into a field. Almost 3,000 people were killed in that incident. 6,000 more were injured. Many more have died since that time from the related effects of that. It was worldwide news, as was Port Arthur. Worldwide news. In World War I, 60,000 Australians were killed in World War I. Do we have any World War I vets here? I don't think so. Not anymore. It was world news. World War II. 27,000 Australians were killed. World news. Even today. Everywhere. World news. The Vietnam War. I have no doubt we have some Vietnam veterans here tonight. 27,000 Vietnam veterans were killed in that war. Worldwide news. The population of Kentish is about 6,000 people, a little more. Do you think if we took those 6,000 people and I'll use the word callously, murdered them, the world would be in uproar if everyone in Kentish was put to death? Devonport, 31,000 people. If all of them were put to death, can you imagine this? What if you add Ulverston, 15,000, and put them all to death? And we're working up the northwest coast here. Penguin, 4,000 people. They too joined all the dead from Kentish, Devonport, Ulverston, Penguin. Let's take Burnie as well. 25,000 in Burnie. And we put them to death. Do you think the world would sit up and take notice? When I read this last statistic, and it affects me now. Last year in Australia, 80,000 babies were plucked from the womb of their mother, torn apart by instruments, excreted by chemicals, and the silent cry of 80,000 people rises up to Father God, where it's recorded in Psalms how wonderfully God weaves life together in the womb. Your works are written in the book of life before you're born. 80,000 babies were aborted in Australia last year, and the world said nothing. Can you imagine that? I mean, they call it a different word now. They say, well, let's not call it murder, let's call it abortion. Because it's not convenient to have a baby, or it's a boy and I wanted a girl. These are uncomfortable statistics. 80,000 babies were killed by medical practice last year. If ever you've been waiting to adopt a child, in Australia you'll be waiting about 5 years. In America you'll be waiting longer. For every baby in America that comes up for adoption, there are about 40 couples wanting that one child. And 80,000 babies in this country were thrown on the rubbish heap of life. 46,000 divorces last year in this country. And I just heard the statistic this morning. How many gay marriages have taken place since that legislation was changed? Malcolm Turnbull was asked what are some of his greatest achievements when he was in power, and I'm not political. And he said, one of my greatest achievements is, he said, I got the same-sex marriage through the Parliament and enacted in law in Australia. Folks, I wonder how that's going to sit with God when the books are opened. Most of us had the chance to vote in a plebiscite, and I wonder if you voted according to the Word of God, or you voted according to the populist ways that the minority, the vocal minority, espouse all these things. Folks, God created Adam, then he created Eve, and he said, for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and stick like glue to his wife. These are unpopular things to talk about. Abortion, murder, gay marriage. Today, they some of you might want to shoot me after this. There are all kinds of excuses being made for people's behaviours nowadays. When my dad played up when he was young, he said his father would give him a kick up the pants or a clip around the ears. But nowadays you can do the wrong thing and go to court and say, I had a terrible childhood. I was not loved by my mother, and they'll call it some fancy name and say, well, you're naughty, don't do it again. Folks, I don't know where we're going. Is it too late? 80,000 abortions? Have we gone too far in society? Is it too late? Same-sex marriage? Is it too late? Where's it going to stop? Where do we go next? Is it too late for you to make a difference in Kentish, in Wilmot, in Ulverston, in Wynyard, in Burnie, in Devonport, in your family? Is it too late to make a difference? If you know Dottie Rambo, who's no longer with us now, a gospel songwriter of some 2,500 songs. And she said, I've never yet looked into the eyes of a man who hasn't seen pain. And you know, as you've walked your life, and we had that powerful story there tonight from Peter Bennett. There are men here who've lost children, men here who have lost their wife through death, or separation, or divorce. There are men here whose children have disowned them, don't talk to them anymore. There are men here tonight who have been defrauded in business. There are men here tonight who have been lied about in the courts. Folks, you know what happens? Dottie Rambo writes, if my heart was a window you could look through, all the pain and scars you would see. And sometimes you've been stabbed in the back by someone who shouldn't have stabbed you in the back. But all of these experiences, and where is Peter Bennett? Where are you sitting? Is that what you look like? I couldn't see you while I was behind the curtain. They leave scars in your life. I don't want to go into an elevator lift or an enclosed room. Is it too late for you to make a difference in your family, in your community, in your life? And we're not going to get the internet tonight, which is a real shame, because I wanted to play another song for you tonight. Whether or not it's too late, and I'll just relate the story to you when the time comes. If I ask for a show of hands, but don't raise them, how many of you men here have been hurt in your life? You would get hands everywhere. Some of you young men, Jacob, life's just good, all right? Life's just good. No issues. But as we get older, life sometimes isn't fair. But you know what, folks? It's just life. And we get on with it. But it leaves marks in your life that if you don't deal with them, will affect everything you do. And that's why that testimony was so powerful. When love comes into your life, a wonderful, wonderful change takes place. And when you suddenly understand that you have a Creator that cares for you, it's a marvellous thing to know. So if you've got scars in your life tonight, if you've got hurts, stab marks in your back, an empty bed when you go to bed at night, no children sitting around your table because they've left you, folks, if that still grinds in your stomach here, then ask God for forgiveness, because that'll hold you back. When Jesus walked the earth, he said, let your light shine. He said, I am the light of the world, but then he encourages you to let your light shine. Now, you've come here to this hall, not just to eat pizza, Domino's make a fantastic pizza, and the price was right. But you come here tonight because it's men gathering with men, and there's something within you that wants something. You can only answer for yourself. Some truth. I have no doubt that many people here have been a Christian for a long time. Peter Bennett, how long have you been a Christian? 60 years. That's a good track record. I want to share quickly a little story from Daniel chapter 5. King Belshazzar threw a party for 1,000 of his most senior people in the government, in the kingdom, and his wives and his concubines. It was a fantastic party. And they were drinking wine, the fruit of the vine, wonderful substance. And he had a wonderful idea. He said, let's go and get the gold and silver goblets that King Nebuchadnezzar stole from the temple in Jerusalem. And we'll drink wine from them. And we'll toast to the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron, wood and stone. And they did. They brought the gold goblets. And everyone toasted to the gods of gold and silver. Ford Rangers, Mercedes-Benz, John Deere tractors, a good crop in the field. And suddenly, the fingers of a hand started to write on the plaster of the palace where the 1,000 were drinking. And it says, Belshazzar, his face turned white, his knees started to knock together, and he was greatly troubled. Now, if that happened here tonight, I guarantee we'd have a similar result. Not one of his wise men, and he consulted the wise men who say, well, oh, you're a Sagittarian, or oh, you're a Libran. No, I'm a Piscan, Pisces. They consulted all these wise astrologers and wise men. Not one of them could read this writing on the wall. And folks, I want to challenge you tonight. Is the writing on the wall for you? Let me tell you, it's on the wall for my father. My father is not in flash health. Neither is my mum, but mum's still going and dad's still going. But folks, the writing is on the wall. And when none of the wise men could read the writing, Belshazzar's mother says, I know a man in whom is the Spirit of God. He's got wisdom, he's got understanding, he can interpret dreams, all of these things. And they brought Daniel in. And the king said, is it true that the Spirit of the Lord is in you and you can do this and you can do that? And Daniel says, yes, God reveals things to me. The king said, I'll give you all sorts of riches. He said, you can keep your riches. I don't want your gifts, I don't want your coat of purple, but still I'm going to tell you what the writing on the wall means. But first he gave him a history lesson. Because King Nebuchadnezzar, his predecessor, God had blessed this man's kingdom. There was no other kingdom on the earth like Babylon. And if you ever want a story and fascination of fortified cities, Google Babylon and its high walls. But King Nebuchadnezzar stopped giving God the glory, and one day he got out of his palace and he looked around at Babylon and he said, look at this fantastic farm that I have created. Look at these wonderful bank balance figures that I have created. My, when I look in the mirror, what a specimen that is. I'm paraphrasing and being silly. But King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Look what I have made with my own hand." And for 7 years, he walks like a donkey in the field with the dew on his back. His hair grew long, his fingers grew long, and he ate grass. Until he came to his senses and God restored him. Daniel gave him that history lesson. And then he said, "Now listen, Belshazzar, this is the writing on the wall for you. Your kingdom is finished. You've been weighed in the balances, and it's not good. Your kingdom will be given to the Medes and the Persians." That night, the Persians diverted the river which flowed through the city into a swamp, and where the waters no longer went through, the armies came in while the 1,000 lords, nobles, concubines and wives were partying, drinking wine, and they overtook the city, and that night Belshazzar, the king, was put to death. Now, I don't want to put the fear into you folks, but if any of you are over 50, and I'm over 50, I'm very aware that I'm closer to the finish line than I am to the start line. In fact, if you're over 45, you're closer to the finish line than you are the start line. We don't like to talk about these things. I was talking to my dad in the nursing home, and I said, "Dad, you're at the end of your life. My wife is Indian. When I got home, she berated me. She said, 'You cannot talk about death to your elders. It's not our culture.' I said, 'But we're not in India. We're in Australia. Have you made preparations for the end of your life? You go on a holiday, you plan the trip, you get the car serviced, the air in the tyres, the caravans looking schmicko.' Folks, if the writing's on the wall for us, how are you going to be when you are weighed in the balance? Or is your kingdom going to be finished?" Now, these are sobering thoughts, and I can't say what that story was tonight. I don't have a story like that. But I have a story that tells me that when the writing is on the wall for me and I'm weighed in the balance, I don't want to have someone say, "Your kingdom is finished." Those of you who know Scripture will know the Scripture that says, "If you endure to the end, you'll be saved." It's not how fast you can run, folks, it's how long you can last. I wanted to play a song here tonight, and it's about Mary and Martha. And their brother Lazarus got sick. And they sent word to Jesus, "Jesus, come quick, Lazarus is sick." But he didn't come. And Lazarus died. And they did the rituals that they do on the dead, as they did then. And they put him in the tomb. And then someone said, "The Lord is on his way." And Jesus came into town and he says to Martha, "Show me the grave." She said, "Lord, if you had been here, he would have been all right. You could have saved him." He said, "Show me the grave." Martha said, "You don't understand. He's been there 4 days. You're too late. He's been there 4 days. Show me the grave." And they took Jesus to the grave and they rolled back the stone. And it says, Jesus said with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And this is what I want to say to you tonight, folks. Someone cried, "He's alive!" He's alive. And you might think it's too late to make a change today. The way we're going, society's changing, all these things that I've mentioned. What can you do? You're just one person? No, you're not. Look around you, folks. Elijah thought he was the only one left. God said, no. There's at least 7,000 others with faith, with hope, with backbone. People who aren't afraid to put no on the plebiscite. Folks, it's not too late. But I want to tell you this. Make provision for where you're going. For 63 years, my mother has been giving me the same message. Pieter, Dutch. Pieter, you must get right with the Lord. Those of you who know my mother, you'll know how she talks. That's a godly parent. Never stopped praying, never stopped encouraging, never stopped telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing. That's a parent's role. If you're a parent, be a friend, but be a parent. Guide, lead, chastise, love, embrace, comfort. I want to leave it there with you tonight. I'm not preaching on hell because we've got a better hope. But folks, when the writing's on the wall for you, I pray that you will not be found wanting. So let your light shine. Let it shine.